Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean, the Digital Event Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. We are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges by creating use of technology. Today, I'm very excited to welcome you to join the Create a Website that Inspires Action with Socha Rochefort, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Nation Builder. So Socha manages customer relationships and strategic partnerships for a host of the most influential political, brand, and not-for-profit organizations around the globe. She's also a political strategy leader committed to build community in an effort to develop more effective leaders from all walks of life. Currently, Socha serves her communities in the following capacities. Including U.S. Ambassador for the British and Irish Trading Alliance, as a board member for the Suffolk University alumni, and also the Boston and New England Rose of Charlie. Before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type into the questions box and I'll be here to assist you. If you have any questions during the webinar, please also type into the box and Socha will get them answered by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as possible to make it very interactive. And please note that your comments and questions will not be appear to the entire group. And please note that the webinar is being recorded. You'll get the recording and also the presentation deck in 1 to 2 business days. Finally, there's a very short survey at the end. Please help us to complete that. Thank you very much. All right, now I'll pass on to Socha for today's section. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Jean, and hello everyone. Excuse my throat. I promise you I am not actually in pain. It sounds a lot worse than it is. I just am hoarse. So please bear with me while I do a couple of those coughs to get us through. So yes, today we are talking about a action purposed website. And so just to ground us in, what is Nation Builder? Why are we here in this conversation? So we build software that builds movements, but what does that encompass? That encompasses a CRM. So that is your dynamic database. This gives you the ability to store your data, whether that's your volunteer data, your donor data, your supporter, your website data, all in the one central place so that you have an understanding of a 360 view of that individual. We then have our communication suite. This is where you have the ability to engage with people via email and text messaging. And you are able to use the information that you have from a consensual and opted-in experience within the CRM. What we're here to focus on today is our CMS. That's that content management system, where you have the ability to have up to 100 websites within the one instance of Nation Builder. And lastly is our fundraising tool, which I know we've spent a lot of time on in other sessions. But like I said, today we're really going to focus on the CMS. So to ground us here, I like to talk through our product principles at Nation Builder. So when we talk about product principles, we're talking about the way in which our product is developed. And to do so, we lean into these core 4 principles. Up first is the premise of owning your own data. So every feature we build, every update we make leans into this premise of your data is yours as the customer. We as Nation Builder do nothing with it. It's safe, right? It is securely monitored by our teams. And ultimately you can access it and build into it and take it with you. Because Nation Builder is infrastructure, your data is always yours. And that's a massive part of how we develop our platform to make sure that our customers have ownership of their data. Our second principle is putting people at the center. And when I'm talking about this, what we're really talking about here is the ability to understand the individual and reflect it back to them. So personalize your outreach, being able to identify the people who are organically recruiting on your behalf. This is truly about how do I put the individual at the center of what I'm doing, whether that's an email blast, whether that is a fundraising letter that you're sending out to individuals or a website that you're building. It's really all about how do you put the individual at the center of the design that you're building for your nonprofit. Up next is moving people to action. This is the ability to get someone from A to C, right? How do you get someone to do the thing you want them to do? When we think about this here at Nation Builder, we think about it in the lens of don't just build lists, right? Don't build a spreadsheet. Everyone can have a spreadsheet of 100,000 people, but what matters are the people who are engaging. So when we think back to Nation Builder's 4 core pillars, it's integrated. You have the ability to actually be integrated within your platform so you can understand who your people are that have opened emails, who your people are that have attended events, who your people are that have signed a petition, etc. And that gives you the ability to be able to move someone from step A all the way down to step E on your ladder of engagement. The last product principle that we focus on is distribution of leadership. And when we think about distributing leadership, what we really are thinking about here is peer-to-peer programs, equipping leaders to fundraise on your behalf, to attract new supporters to your organization, and ultimately building networks. All of these product principles, like I said, are built into when we are doing software development, when we are thinking about the best ways in which we can put our foot forward to ensure that our customers are successful in what they're trying to build in the world. And so when you see the different areas of Nation Builder, this is really what we're grounded in building out our platform. Action Button joined the Nation Builder team as an acquisition back in 2021, and it was created so that people never missed a moment to act when they were inspired. The reason I wanted to bring this up today is maybe you don't have the most advanced website in the world, but you do still want to be able to gather action to understand how people are engaging with you. And maybe you have a social media account. Action Button allows you to place the button itself, so where someone takes action, on any internet property that you have access to. And so this is a really easy way for you to be able to go in and create a multitude of actions. So you can see here that there are several different ones ranging from polls and quizzes to gather insights, sharing your story via a message or a video, signing a petition or a pledge, donations, the ability to volunteer. And the whole idea here is to weave different actions together, right? To create an engaging experience and ultimately move people to do the thing that you want them to do. And so Action Button is a way in which you can do that without having to build out an entire website. It really depends on your organization, but I wanted to offer this as a thing that you could do if you were looking to just create small actions that you can put throughout. When you think about Action Button and Nation Builder together, these are kind of the 5 core components. Action Button is designed to gather insights, raise awareness, and build your audience, right? It's that real top of funnel. When you're thinking about your website build, when you are thinking about how do I make this the most engaging for my supporters, your top of funnel component is really where Action Button is able to aid in that. And when you come into Nation Builder, it's really all about mobilizing your community and ultimately building community with your audience. It's not just an audience. It's not just 100,000 people. It's actually a community that you are building with. So now we're going to dive into a construct around personalization and the importance of personalization. And this is across, yes, your website, but also your email programs. And I really want you to think of this in the concept of I've got my supporters, they're coming here. So how do I ensure that they are having the best experience possible? So privacy by default. This comes up all the time in every conversation I have with individuals. The ability to have privacy be at the forefront of what you are doing, because it is a topic of interest for a number of people across the board. So the first option here is to gain consent from your advocate. This is the first thing you should be doing. That can show up in a number of different ways. If you're thinking about it from your website, your consent is going to be your acceptance of a cookie if you are running any cookie data on your website. It's also going to be any form submissions. So you'll have a consent option for individuals who want to interact with you, to consent to your newsletter, to consent to receiving information after they RSVP'd or they signed a petition. You also want to dig into this construct of developing clear paths of engagement for your advocates. What I mean by that is when they come to your site, they should have a clear understanding of how they are going to be engaged with from the first action they take. So if I came today to your site and I signed up for your newsletter, what I would hope not to happen is that I receive a donation ask immediately. That's a bait and switch, right? That person consented to a newsletter and now they are being sent a fundraising appeal. You need to make sure that people are clear on how they are going to be engaged with you. And lastly, you want to know who, how, and when people want to be in conversation with you. What I mean by that is there are different ways in which people want to be communicated with, and there are different channels and platforms that they prefer to be communicated with and that they are active on. So for example, if you are building out an email program, you want to make sure that the people who have opted into your email actually want to receive it. And so making sure that you're sending them back to a website with a confirmation campaign, or giving them the option to hear from you in a different way. Maybe it's sending them a text message. Maybe it is just by direct mail. There are a number of different ways that you can communicate with your supporters to ensure that they are in a relationship with you. So in the same vein with privacy, we want to think about saying goodbye to big data. Ultimately, you want to be smarter with the data you collect. Don't just collect more of it. Teams that succeed know exactly why they need each data set they collect and how it will be invaluable to what they're trying to achieve. They ultimately make sense of the data that they have. They analyze it, aggregate it to paint a more complete picture of the people behind their database. The individuals behind their data matter most, whether they are supporters, voters, volunteers, donors. So when we think about this in an example, when you're able to turn a list of email addresses into a more complete profile of the people, who the people actually are, it's a game changer, right? You get a better understanding of who the people in your community are. You have the ability to establish more meaningful relationships, and you can see more impactful action from the people, those people, as a result. If you collect information and don't take action based on what you find, you are not going to see results. The value of data is the potential you have to do something meaningful with it. Hopefully, something that creates real value to that supporter, right? That's really what that's all about when you're collecting data of someone. So let's say you have 1.6 million people in your database. If you can't identify the top tier among those people, the ones that help you drive awareness, create the community you're building, lead others, then all you have is a very large email list with little value. I want you all to think about this today, right? As you're leaving today's session, as you're wrapping out your day, why do I collect the data I collect? If you have an answer to that, amazing. If you are unsure, list it out. What are the data beats that I'm collecting and why? And then what am I using it for? It's a really important way for you to think through the top of that user journey. So, personalization is a tactic that many organizations still to this day seem to struggle with. And the thing you need to know here is that your community is smarter than they ever have been, and they truly expect a personalized experience from the website that they visit to the emails that they receive. To keep the individual's attention, honestly, nearly everything must feel tailored and uniquely designed for them. The more personalized their experience, the happier and more likely they are to engage with your calls to action. Infos research has constantly proven that there is a desire from people to better personalization, with 31% of people surveyed saying that they would like to see their online experience far more personalized than it currently is. And with 59% of people who have experienced personalization believed it's actually had a noticeable influence on their engagement with that website. These numbers speak for themselves, right? It's really, really key to have a personalized website experience to your supporters. You need to reflect back to these people what they have done to support your organization and what you need them to do next. This is a key tactic to increasing trust between them and your mission. Another important thing to remember is that if you want to have people advocate on your behalf, you need to make it really easy for them to do that. Using tools that allow you to make dynamic asks based on historic engagement isn't just a nice to have, but truly a necessity. The last thing I want to wrap into here is the, excuse me, some stats across the industry on the value of personal engagement. So images, while these are important, they do not perform as well for calls to actions. In a number of studies completed, it was evident that button-based calls to actions converted better than images, regardless of the type of the call to action. Buttons in emails dramatically outperform their image counterparts, with the images converting at 2.6% and buttons converting at 6.8%. The reason I bring this up, I know we're not focusing on email today, is it's a part of the user journey. If I've just come from a website that has a beautiful personalized experience, and then I get an email that is not personalized to me and just has an image in the middle of it, I'm not going to engage. And so while it's not directly what we're talking about, it is inextricably linked. Copy. Your content, your copy should be relevant to your supporter. This is not me telling you to create 100 different versions of your content, but it is to make sure that you have dynamic content or the ability to create dynamic content. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to do that within Nation Builder. And so for us, it is called Liquid. Liquid is a language in which you can render either demographic, geographic, or engagement data back to the end user within our software. That's what I am talking about when I'm talking about dynamic content. It is not you creating 100 versions. It's you using technology to do so. The easiest way to describe this is it's an advanced mail merge, right? You have the ability to render that information back to the end user. And last but definitely not least is testing your content and tracking the results with recruiter IDs. If you are using Nation Builder, you have what we call recruiter IDs available in your software. And this is where you're able to actually test which of your content is doing better. So if you're A/B testing, let's say a headline or the opening paragraph on a blog post, you are able to test the results based on how people engage with the content using recruiter IDs. You can also do this with Google Analytics, but really what I'm trying to get at here is testing. Test that content. It's not going to be perfect every single time. Test the image versus the button. Test the copy. Is it relevant to the individual? The more you test, the better you're going to get. So the last piece here is just kind of really honing in on the data across industry standards. So in a study completed by HubSpot and Experian, it was found that personalized calls to actions convert 202% better. For this study, more than 330,000 call to actions were analyzed, looking at 3 primary types of CTAs. A basic call to action. This is a call to action that does not change based on any attribute of the visitor, right, of the supporter. It's the same for every single person who visits that website. The second CTA is the multivariant CTA. These are similar to basic CTAs, but instead there are 2 or more calls to actions being tested against one another. And traffic to your website is split evenly to each variation. And then you, as the organization, can select a winner based on which call to action converts your supporters better. And then lastly, and my personal favorite, is a smart call to action. These are calls to actions that are tailored to the individual. There can be numerous, up to thousands, tens of thousands ways in which the call to action can adapt based on the visitor, such as their location, their browser language, whether they're already a customer of yours or a supporter of yours, right? There's so much you can think about there when it Comes back to what we talked about on collecting data. Why are you collecting it? How are you using it? Awesome. The other pieces here are on the email component of this. And when you think about your personalized emails generating a 6-time higher transaction, and that's not just financial transaction, that is basically them submitting or completing the call to action. How can you not personalize? You have to, right? You have to do that, or else you are leaving engagement on the table, whether that engagement comes in the form of monetary value or in them signing up to a petition or recruiting people to your organization. And last but not least here is the ability to trigger emails based on behavior. Specifically here, I'm talking about when someone takes an action on the front-facing site, being able to trigger an email that either gives them a thank you note or takes them on a custom email series based on what they did on the front-facing site. That is invaluable to one, making your work more scalable because you already have that journey set, but two, increasing engagement with the end user. Okay. So in the last kind of 20 minutes there, we just covered really the personalization component and why it's key across the board. I'm now going to move into the website. And so within the Nation Builder software, you have the ability to create an event, a survey, a pledge, a petition, a donation, just to name a few pages. And the reason our website platform is unique is that every single page actually has an action associated with it. And while a beautiful website is nice to look at, it is not designed sometimes for action. And Nation Builder is designed for that, right? So your supporters can engage with you digitally. You want to make sure to be able to share how they've engaged with that organization in the past, right? And so the first thing I want to ground us in here is the user journey. And so these are 6 beats that I really want you all to kind of ground yourselves in. And maybe you're already doing this. If you are, fantastic. If you're not, think about where this could fit in or what parts of this you are doing into your engagement strategy. So up first is a persona for your ideal supporter. You can and should have multiple personas, but there's always one that you're going to come back to when you're thinking about your baseline for a net new supporter. Identification of your voice is key. Your voice is going to change, whether it's your executive director or your finance director speaking, whether it is a time of crisis versus a regular outreach. Your voice is going to change, but there should be a core tenet that is always there, that people know it's you, that the people know your organization's tone and voice. You want to have an advocate's journey mapped out and creating those actions that you want those supporters to take. From that, you can then build dynamic journeys based on those actions, right? So for example, you have a donation action, you have a petition, you have an event, you have a volunteer. And maybe there's a specific sequence based on whether or not someone takes a petition versus a volunteer page action first. This is really all up to you and your organization to make these decisions. And we provide obviously the tools for you to do that. But it's really important that you sit down and you actually think about what are the ways in which people can take action with me on my website? And is there a specific sequence journey that I want them to do it in? And what's the value of it? You want to prompt your supporters to share, and you also want to really reward them for doing so, right? There are a number of ways you can do that. They can share it through social media, they can share it through in person, but the real key here is you want to track that so that you can then ultimately reward them. People and human beings in general like to be rewarded. They like to be patted on the back and say, job well done, thank you. Do that for your supporters. You can never say thank you enough, right? It's really, really important. And lastly is follow up. The amount of times I have signed up on a volunteer page or a petition page and never been followed up with it just blows my mind. You are just leaving people at the door. If they aren't getting an immediate response from you when they took an action, we've all been there. The late night scrolling through your phone in bed, right? Someone takes an action. They should wake up in the morning to an email so that they can remember that they took that action. They can then start to build a relationship with your organization. So here's an example of that user journey, kind of with some context put into it. So here I've identified that my persona is women that live in Sydney over the age of 40 that care about bikes. I've gone ahead and I've built an ad for that audience to drive them to a petition page. Once someone in my persona signs that petition page, I'm going to send them on a dynamic journey to a volunteer page. Once they've signed that volunteer page, I'm going to send them to a donation page, right? So creating that custom journey. Then I'm going to prompt them to share this donation page with their friends. And then they will be sent a dynamic email series to anyone who has made the donation. And on the flip side of that, right, people who did not make the donation will also receive a dynamic email. So this is an example of what a user journey could look like. Simple, right? Write it down, bullet it out for what it is that you want people to go on. So going back to the action pages, the ways in which this operates within Nation Builder software is our fully integrated platform, right? So when we think about action specific settings, we're thinking about action chains. So that's the ability to say, when they take the action on the petition page, they are now driven to a volunteer page. The tags, point people and paths. This is where your work becomes scalable. This is automatically assigning a tag, which is a way in which you can attribute data to someone. A point person. This is an individual who is responsible for the relationship at your organization. And paths, that's that ladder of engagement that we've talked about. These are really, really key in being able to have a scalable organization, because what I'm talking about, right, it's not easy. It doesn't just happen overnight. The software, yes, gives you the tools, but ultimately it is your work to do, right? And hold. Developing out user journeys, creating what it is, the dynamic responses you are, is all based on what you are doing day in, day out. So up next is, how does this website look, right? Ways in which you can make your website more attractive. And so when we think about that here at Nation Builder, we've got three options. We've got our stock themes, which you can see here on the right hand side. So those are kind of out of the box, anyone can use them. Our custom theme. So this is working with our partners, whether it's a ecosystem partner, an architect, etc., that can build you a completely custom theme, whether that's look and feel, whether that's having the dynamic content in the website theme itself. And then lastly is our theme marketplace. And this is where you are able to kind of purchase a theme from one of our partners who placed it on the marketplace. So I could not do this conversation without talking about SEO, or search engine optimization. There is so much value to the words that you are writing when it comes to the content you're producing on your website. For SEO, if I type into Google Nation Builder, you're going to see Nation Builder returns a number of results. All of them, or at least all on the first page, are from nationbuilder.com, our website. That is what you should be striving for. The reason being is you're giving yourself more visibility. There is a lot of science that goes into SEO. And so, for example, in the bike example I just gave right now, in the user journey, if my nonprofit was a nonprofit that was looking to increase the number of bikes or people that had access to bikes, making sure that they had safe access to driving within their community, I would be backfilling in to my content what buzzwords, we'll call it, or keywords people are looking for that have an interest in bikes, right? Some of this is going to be really industry specific, and each of you will know your own keywords that you're going to be referencing when it comes to SEO. And be authentic here. You should not just be writing pieces of content to be rendered higher in search engines. This should be completely authentic to who you are and what you do. But there is strategy that can go into that, right? So if I go back to my bike example, Let's say I'm writing a blog post that includes an action button so that it's sending a petition in there. I am going to make sure that my blog post has specific keywords around bike lanes, around the ability for someone to drive safely on a bike. Also, if I have any geographic preferences, I will put in some geographics in there so that if people type bikes in Sydney, I might appear, right? And within Nation Builder, you have the ability to do this on a page-by-page basis, as well as on the site-wide level. And so when you think about that on a page-by-page basis, that's giving you the ability to really hone in on what you want for SEO strategy versus just that site-wide. And so that's the thing to think about in your current website, or if you're looking at building a website right now, is are you able to kind of really drill in on a page-by-page basis, or is it a site-wide SEO structure? So lastly, here we have our social share prompts, and on every single page, you should have the opportunity to prompt people to share about the action that they just took on your page with their social media networks. The real power that comes from this is that when a supporter shares a social share prompt, they are unknowingly sharing a link to the page that is unique to them, right? It is really, really powerful because this allows you as the organization to track and understand how much is this individual bringing in to your organization organically just by sharing it out to their social accounts. And last but definitely not least in this section is our dynamic follow-up. When we think about dynamic follow-up, we are really anchoring in the ability to say thank you up first for taking the action you just took, but then also being able to actually take them on a unique journey. So here what you're seeing is the ability to actually set a time delay in between your email sends based on the action that they took on the website. And so if someone takes a petition, they automatically get an email that says, thank you for signing the petition. Then they wait 2 days. They receive another email from your organization that is maybe asking them to recruit some friends. Then maybe they wait maybe they wait a week or 2 weeks, and the relationship continues. You have to, in doing this, also create dynamic content. This should not be flat. This should not be a dear friend or a generic email. If you have data, if you've collected that person's first name, if you've collected their geographic location on a form, render that back to them. It's not hard, right? It's really important. It increases engagement and it increases the likelihood that that individual is going to interact with your content after the first act. So to close out today's session, we're going to go through personalization throughout your supporter journey. So when we think about that supporter journey, you've got your first moment, right? You've got paid media, earned media, organic reach, and supporter recruitment programs. These are all important mechanisms to bring in new people, but the power to increase the number of people coming into a movement, again, comes from personalizations. So when we think about each of these, right, we've got our paid media. How are you personalizing paid media? You are building relationships with journalists. You are identifying where it is best for you to put sponsored content in, where it is best for events for you to attend. Earned media. This is truly building relationships with journalists so that you have media that is earned, right? You are featured in a newspaper article that is coming out so that you're getting more exposure to net new audiences. Organic reach. This is all about the ability to increase your reach. There are numbers of ways in which you can do that when you are thinking about social media, looking at a hashtag strategy in particular, but also being able to increase the number of people that are sharing your content will always increase your organic reach. And then lastly is supporter recruitment programs, which we'll talk more about in a second. So now you've acquired a new supporter. What are you going to do with them? The first thing you're going to do is a welcome email program. No matter how someone comes into your organization, you should welcome them with dynamic content. Ultimately, you could think about reflecting how they joined or asking, right? Building that relationship by asking questions for what they care about. That way, you're also going to get some custom data on these new supporters that you'll be able to use to create a personalized website experience moving forward. When a new supporter joins, it is imperative to take them on a custom journey on what you know about them. I all the time are in conversations with our customers, identifying how they are going to set out a ladder of engagement for the first 90 days so that a supporter can get a real sense of what the organization needs from them. We talked about that user journey earlier. If you can do that, right, in the first 90 days, if you can really map out, these are the actions I want people to take, this is the order in which I want them to take it, this is what happens if they only take one or two of the four, these are the different communication strategies I have in place for that. It's really just going to aid you in the long run if you have that mapped out up front, and you don't have to have every single piece of it mapped out, because I'm not saying here that you should all go home and sit down and write out different scenarios, but you should at least have a sense for what those scenarios could be, and from that the ability to trigger something in an instance, right? If people are not engaging with the volunteer page, maybe you need to change it, maybe you need to remove it, add a different call to action, right? So you have to be agile in this. Number 3, if you don't know what a supporter cares about, you can't create the personalized journeys that we're talking about, right? You have to be able to actively engage with what your supporter cares about in a personalized journey. This comes back to where we started today's session, consent, right? You need to ensure that people are consented into how you're communicating with them to build the foundation of trust where your supporters will want to share more information with you across the board. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, so moving on, we're thinking about keeping these folks engaged. We've got gamification, right? The ability to gamify how an individual is interacting with you, whether that's earning points from a point system. This can incentivize how individuals want to continuously engage with your organization. Leaderboards, right? This is the ability to actually showcase who it is that is at the top of whatever it is you want them to be doing, whether that's volunteering, signing your petitions, increasing your engagement. But like I said earlier, people really, really enjoy and like and expect to be thanked, patted on the back, rewarded for the way in which they are engaging with your organization. You want to have dynamic asks. We've talked a lot about this today, but it is important to continuously drill in, right? Diversify your action, make it varied, give fun opportunities to get involved, from events to volunteering, money bombs, petitions, pledges, donations. And last but definitely not least is that personal website experience. What you're seeing here on the right-hand side is an example of what we call a public profile. This is giving you the ability to share with each of your individual supporters their own space that is branded by your organization, right? So they're getting their own digital asset from you. And it's a really great way to empower individuals to share out on your behalf. There are a number of ways that you could implement a public profile when it comes to a digital strategy, and I'm happy to talk more about that if folks have questions. But it's a really powerful way to just kick off a relationship by identifying, hey, you now have a digital asset that is representative of both you and the organization that you can share on our behalf. Last but definitely not least, I told you we'd come back to it, is the recruitment programs. Your supporters, the people who care about what you're doing, who donate to your organization, who fundraise on your behalf, who attend your events, these are the people who are most likely to be able to bring in net new audience to you without you having to pay. So when we think about who those people are, I always ground it in this construct of finding your 5%. So let's say you have an audience of 100,000, 10% of that, right? It's going to be 10,000. So you want to find your 5,000, your top 5,000 people. The reason I say your top 5,000 people is you want this to be a small pool, right? So that's again why it's your 5%, right? You want this to be a smallish pool of people in relation to your larger audience. How each organization defines that 5% is extremely variable. You may not care about fundraising. That might not be a thing that you are doing. You maybe rely heavily on grants as opposed to individual dollar donations. Another organization, maybe that's the only thing that they're tracking for, is how much individual dollar donations are coming in. So that's just one example of the variability that organizations can have when you are finding your top 5%. I do always recommend as well that you are layering in engagement data. So looking at how they are responding to email programs, to text programs, to phone banking programs. So it's not just the actions that they're taking, but it's also their passive engagement. Create VIP content for these people. This is a really easy way to create a completely bespoke and unique experience for a subset of your people. They have the ability to come in, they can log in to a certain area within your website. You can have downloadable sheets for them. They can they can receive a top 5% email blast. Like, make it special, make it unique, make it something that people want to be a part of. Incentivize them to recruit friends and family. So this again is going to vary from organization to organization. For some folks, your incentives are bumper stickers or t-shirts or hats. For others, it's actually an Amazon gift card or some type of financial contribution. And look, it really depends. You know your audience better than I do. And so being able to just ultimately incentivize them for doing the work that they're doing is really going to help you in increasing your numbers. And last but definitely not least is start the journey that we just talked about with all of the new supporters that your 5% bring in. Okay, with that said, I am done going through content. So I would love to hear from you all if you have questions. I know we just covered a lot of ground today.
100%. Thank you very much, Sacha. It's a very informative sections. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type into the questions box and then we can get them answered right now. So just a reminder that if you would like to have a study again for the information, we'll be sending you all the presentation deck and also the recording in 1 to 2 business days. So you don't need to worry if you miss something or if you want to go back to study again. All right, so we got a questions here. So Sacha, thank you for the presentation. It's very useful. Can you recommend, like, because given that they only have limited resources, so which do you think is the most important and have a bigger impact from the above information you spoke about?
Personalization. Personalization is the biggest takeaway from today that I would love for folks to have. Like, it's really, really key to make sure that people, one, know how and why they're involved in your organization. But really, you want to be personalizing your content so that every single individual who's interacting with your content, I'm going to stop showing my screen. There we go. Every single person who's interacting with your content feels, or your website feels, like they're having a unique and custom experience. And that is just going to kind of propel you forward in leaps and bounds.
Lovely, thank you. Oh, we got an interesting questions here asking, so do you have any reference like websites or something they can benchmark? Like which one is good, then they can just follow?
So, and this is, I get this question all the time. No, because a personalized experience, you shouldn't know it's happening. So, for example, Jean's interaction with Nation Builder may be very different than my it is going to be very different than my interaction. And so it's all personalized based on your experience. And you're going to have, net new people, like I talked about, right? When you're recruiting individuals in. And so there will always be a what is I have no information on the individual. What is that experience? And
Yeah.
then as you gather that information, whether it is cookie data, right, browser, language, etc., which is more on the analytics side, or it is the consensual data that we talked about, right, of and again, cookie is always consented to as well. You have to accept that consent, but like active engagement, PII data, where they have signed a petition, signed a volunteer page, signed a newsletter, etc. That is where you can really make a personalized journey. And there isn't, a best in class. When I think like I know a number of organizations that do it well, but you wouldn't know it because you would have to have gone through the journey of actually giving them data so that they can create that custom experience for you. So I truly would recommend, like, again, with personalization being in mind, when you head home tonight, sit down and just think through, like, what are the data points that I have and what would be the unique personalization, whether it's people who have the tag, or people who live in Sydney get this image, people who live in Melbourne get this image. As basic as that, right? That's personalization. And if you can just sit down and write out, like, what are the data points that you have and what would you change on your front facing site based on those data points, that's going to get you to the place where you can start to actually think about how would you implement that.
100%. It really depends on like case by case, and it's customized. So that's why. All right. So looks like that was the last question. Before we wrap up, do you have anything you would like to add?
Just thank you. I love being with this community. So you have my email. Reach out if you have questions. And yeah, and there's obviously the Connecting Up partnership. So there's that discount.
Lovely. Thank you very much again. It's really great to have you here being with us. And all right, before we finish, I guess you're now seeing my screen. So this is the conference that we are having very soon on the May 11th to 13th. So every year we are having a conference. Last year we are having a hybrid one. It's once a year conference. So we just want to take these great opportunities to share with you. This is a very great event. If you would like to join us, feel free to go to this website, conference.connectingup.org. And I'll be also placing this link onto the follow-up email as well. So you just can click on buy tickets. I'll be offered the discount code as well, so that you can enjoy the sections with our even better price. It's a 3 days event with all the sections. These are the great speakers you'll be encountering. And also we'll be having the conference in Melbourne Convention Centre. All right, thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Sacha, again. Hope we'll see you very soon next. Goodbye.